So
There we go.
all they need to do now is change that to let's get this party started, and Zoom is on fire.
Yeah, then they'll be all right.
All right, welcome everybody. Come on in. Come on in. Like there's any other option here, but we are really excited to have you join us for this webinar. Excuse me while I am trying to get this live on Facebook as well. Let's see here while all of this stuff is happening. So we are recording, we are live streaming, we are doing all of the things. So come on and tell us hello. We've got Vivers here from Anaheim. Let's see. I'm assuming there are other people here because I can see you. We've got Jamie from Connecticut, Jenny from Tampa. Okay, now it's all coming in. Hello, everybody. Canada, Costa Rica. Kathy Parker is in Costa Rica. Hello, Kathy. Atlanta,
Wow.
Canada, New York, North Carolina, Illinois. Where are overseas people? London, yay, Switzerland. Charlotte.
Wow,
I'm
fantastic.
gonna have to start doing a map. And I think when we do these webinars, I'm gonna have to start putting a pin in a map from all the places that people come because it's very exciting. All right. I've had a lot of coffee
Wow.
today and went for a run, so I am pumped up and ready to go today with our special guest from Plottr, Troy Lambert. So Plottr is a new tool to me. They're a new sponsor this year of the Women in Publishing Summit, so we're excited to give them a very warm welcome. I have known Roland. Is he a co-founder? What's his position in the company actually?
Roland is our outreach coordinator, I think his official title. Yeah, he helps with marketing and outreach. That's
there
what he
you
does.
go. So I've known him. Oh yay, James bought Plottr yesterday. I hope it was through
nice.
I hope it was through our special deal. I've known him for a long time. We've been in writing communities together. We've chit-chatted on different things, but I didn't know until he reached out about Plottr that he was involved with it. But for me, and you and I were talking a little bit before we started the webinar, that you said you were a very bad pantser. I was a horrific pantser. Like I had in my mind, I'm just going to sit down and write this book. 10 years later, I was still trying to figure out what should be in the middle and what was gonna. So I need a tool to help me organize my stuff so that I can be better and more successful. So we are thrilled to have you all as a sponsor of the conference. Hope we can show everybody how amazing your tool is. And I'm going to stop talking now and pass it over to you. But first, let me just remind everyone, subtitles are on, the recording is on. We will load this to YouTube immediately after and send it out. But if you are just anxious to find it right away, go to our YouTube channel. That's Write, Publish, Sell on YouTube. And there is a Q&A box. Please use that for your questions so they don't get lost in the chat. In the chat, if you love and use Plottr and have it, please share what you love about it in the chat so that other people can see your experiences too. And now, Troy, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much. And the first thing I'm going to do is bring up a keynote presentation. I'm going to do a presentation and then a demo and then a slightly more presentation. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is that I'm a little bit different than you were. And hopefully everybody can see that now.
Yep, I can see it. It's perfect.
But I'm a little bit different than you in that I was a terrible pantser, but I wrote quickly, but just horribly. And so I have some novels that I wrote in college. The last time I saw them, they were on a 3.5-inch disc. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's the save icon on your computer, 3D printed. And they were on that type of a disc in a format called WordPerfect 5, which I don't think you can translate to anything anymore. So I am actually very excited that they remained there because my initial books were horrible. But fast forward a few years, you could probably notice from my face and my hair that it's been a few years since I was in college. And I am the education lead for Plottr. I'm a mystery and thriller author of over 30 novels. I started out pantsing sci-fi when I was in college, and oddly enough, now I'm a mystery and thriller author, written over 30 novels. I'm based in the mountains of Idaho, where it's very cool and kind of nice today, actually. And I'm also the president of Idaho Writers Guild this year and a bunch of other stuff too. In other words, I'm overcommitted, stretched thin, and way too busy. But that's enough about me. What we're going to talk about, what we'll cover in this talk. First of all, I'm going to give you an introduction to Plottr and why in the world it would matter to you at all. Then I'm going to do a demo of Plottr, where I'm just going to show you live how I use Plottr, how Plottr works, give you kind of a walkthrough. Then we're going to come back for a special offer, and then I will stick around for questions and answers as long as you guys have them. So we're going to start with the ways that authors struggle with plotting, because authors often feel that plotting isn't writing. Creating an outline is time consuming, but it doesn't have to be, but it can be. That depends partially on you. Plotting shifts your focus. Authors often tell me this: planning requires a different state of mind, and that is true. Organization and planning requires a different state of mind. And I'm going to talk to you about how I do this as we go through the demo. But plotting shows you plot holes. It's easy to get overwhelmed and confused, but plotting can help you not be overwhelmed and confused. Plotting is an intricate map. There's a lot to keep in your heads, but plotting does not have to be an intricate map. It can be a very simple roadmap, especially during your first draft. And I'll talk to you about how I use Plottr actually more in revision than I do in the initial drafting process. And plotting isn't accurate. We often change the plot while we write. Well, that is also true. We often do change the plot when we write, but that's okay. We have ways that we can manage that. And I'm going to talk to you about those too. So we're going to talk about 5 ways that authors need plotting. Plotting isn't writing, but it helps you conceptualize your story and know where you're going and what you're doing. When I first started as a pantser, when I first transitioned into plotting, I was writing a book, and about halfway through, or about 2/3 of the way through, I figured, you know what would make this faster is if I knew how this book was going to end. And I outlined the last part of it. The next book I wrote, I was about halfway through, and I thought, you know what would help this book is if I knew the end. And then I plotted out the end, and then my writing went faster, and I found it was easier. So the next book I started plotting a little earlier after I had just started the book. And then from there, I started plotting every one of my books because I knew that it made me faster, and it actually made the process a little more fun. Plotting does shift your focus. Planning allows you time at a high level. And I'm going to talk to you about that high level when it comes to revision as well. Plotting shows you plot holes. We kind of talked about that before. Plotting is an intricate map. It helps you make important connections and plans, especially when you write mysteries and thrillers like I do. There's certain things you need to get right. If you don't get them right, trust me, your readers will tell you. They will email you, stalk you on social media, and all kinds of things, but they don't stalk mystery authors too much because they know that we know methods of killing people. So that kind of alleviates a little bit of that. But so what is Plottr? It's a visual book outlining and story Bible software for writers. Both of those things are important, and we're going to talk about both of them. It's available for Windows, Mac, Android, and iOS. I'll talk to you about that as well, and how it's available as a web app. That happens to be what I use most of the time. And we've had over 50,000 writers that have downloaded Plottr. I was talking before we came on air that I was one of the first 100 people in the country to use Plottr. So it's kind of a unique distinction. I've been using it for a long time. So we've been seeing all these cool places. You've probably seen us hanging out with Dave Chesson, Mark Dawson, Drafted Digital, and some of these other cool people, because a lot of people really like Plottr, as you can probably tell. Now, how can Plottr help you? It helps you plot and outline faster. I was talking earlier about speed. When I was a pantser, I was slow, or I would write fast but terrible first drafts, and then my revision process was incredibly agonizing, painful, and slow. Okay. The second thing is it helps you organize your characters and places across books and series. This is huge. I have an incredibly long series that I'll tell you about, and I have to organize a ton of characters, different methods of killing, all kinds of different stuff like that. Okay, and it's really handy for that. It helps you improve productivity and save time. This is one of my favorite things. Improving productivity is one of my, I have so many stories in my head. There's no way I'm going to live long enough to write them all. So the more I can get down, the faster, the better off I'm going to be. You write cleaner first drafts, generally speaking, and you have more fun writing. And we'll talk about that as well. We have a bunch of case studies. If you've heard of Michael Anderle, big sci-fi writer, guy behind 20 Books Vegas. Before Plottr, he used Excel and Scrivener. Now, even when he works with other writers that write with him in different series, they use Plottr. It saves time, improves the structure, and basically it's more fun as well. Celia Kyle is a romance author. And I've seen her process that she used before Plottr, and it was very frightening. It made me like twitch a little bit and stuff like that. It was really, really bad. And then I've seen her new process, and her new process is much better. Now, I will tell you that she's still very much a pantsterer, very much a discovery writer, but she uses Plottr for different kinds of organization, especially in the revision process. And it's really, really useful for that. And then you probably know this guy or have at least heard of him by now. If a story feels wrong, is not worrying. I pull it apart scene by scene and put it on a Plottr timeline, and I can see right away where pacing is off and where there are problems. I tried all kinds of things before Plottr, and they just didn't work super well. We'll talk about that a little bit. Okay. With that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to move into, if I can find my cursor, stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to move right into a demo of Plottr. And I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like from the beginning, and then I'm going to show you how you build something out, how you build out something. Okay, so typically when you start with Plottr, you come into a blank file like this, okay? This blank file, essentially down this left-hand side, starts with one plot line. So this section of Plottr is called the timeline, but this is one what we call plot line. Now, generally speaking, I add more. I'm going to add a subplot. And then as a mystery writer, I'm going to add a timeline. And I'm going to add something called clues. And while this may not be relevant to your particular type of writing, I will explain the different ways that you can use these in just a few moments. Now, up here starts with chapters. Now, I can add more chapters, as many as I would like, but I can also change this. I do not write in chapters. Generally speaking, I write in beats. And that is a personal preference. And most of my beats actually are a complete chapter because I write these potato chip chapters for mysteries. But I go in and change this to beat because that's the way my brain works. That's the way I think. You can go under this little structure button and change it any way that you would like. You can also change the color. You can add a border. You can do all kinds of cool things. Like I can add a border to this top, these boxes up top and stuff like that. I'm going to show you more of that in a minute. Then at the intersection of these two things, at these beats and these plot lines, I can create what's called scene cards. I'm just going to call this scene 1 for the sake of demonstration. But you can name these anything you want. Now, for me, usually this is the title that tells me something about what's in the scene. And then when I click inside this, I can add much more information. Now, there's a ton of information I can add. Now, what this usually is for me when I'm in the planning process is this is a writing prompt. This tells me what I need to write that day, okay, to accomplish getting this particular thing done, okay? Now, you have all these rich text features. You can change the font. You can put bold italics. You can put bullet points. You can do all kinds of cool stuff, and I'm going to show you some of that in a few minutes. But what you can also do is you can add attributes to your scenes. Now, me personally, I have attributes that I add to every one of my scenes, and I'll talk to you about those in a minute. But in this case, like I've added weather and perhaps the point of view. Now, this can be anything that's important to your story. The primary thing to remember is that attributes in anything in Plottr, attributes apply globally. So in scenes, they apply to every single scene that you create in this particular plot line. Okay, so every single one of them, if I want to know the weather and the point of view, those are things that I can fill out. So I'm going to type wrong because I'm live, but I'll put cloudy and point of view first, and I'm going to say wolf. And you'll see why I'm going to use that here in just a moment. But those are attributes. Now, if I delete this attribute, if I hit this little garbage can button, delete this attribute, it deletes it in every single scene. So I lose everything that I've entered into these blanks in every scene. This is why we also have the option of templates. Now, templates, this is one of the ones that I use all the time. Now, you can create your own templates. I've created some of my own, but one of the ones that I use all the time with scenes is goal, motivation, and conflict. Why? Well, your scene needs to have every one of these things, or it probably doesn't belong in your book. And that's another workshop for another day. Okay. So now that I've shown you what these look like, I'm going to show you actually a document that's kind of fleshed out. Now, I am going to warn you for this. I'm going to use the Three Little Pigs. It's been out for a while, but there are some spoilers ahead. So if you haven't read it and you're watching the recording, feel free to pause it and go back to the Three Little Pigs. But I do apologize. There are some spoilers here. Okay, so this is what the structure looks like if I've added an act structure. Now, sometimes I will do this with my books. And the way you do that is we look under the structure heading. I can add different levels. Okay, so I can add an act level, so I know what's in each act of my book. I can add a chapter level and then a scene level. Now, usually I only go 2 levels deep. Essentially is I go act, chapter, or act and then beat. Okay, but you can do this in any way that you want. You can actually add as many levels as you'd like. I don't recommend going beyond 3 or 4. But you can if you really feel like you need to, and we can talk about that a little bit in Q&A. Okay, now you can see I've created a bunch of scene cards. Now these scene cards have things that my other scene card did not have. One of them is characters. I have tagged characters in here. You can tag scenes by characters, you can tag them by setting, and you can create, which we're going to see in a little bit, you can create your own user created tags. Which means that you can filter and categorize these scenes in any way that you want. The other cool thing that you can do is you can change the color of the scene. Now, I'm going to tell you how I use this. You may use it a completely different way. But when I'm in the writing process, I change this to blue. That means that I'm writing this scene. I'm in the process of drafting this scene. Now, once that part is done, I change it to yellow. What yellow means to me is that I need to edit that scene. Once it is edited and I've gone through my process of revision as much as I'm going to go through, I leave that scene green. When all the scenes across my main plot line are green, that means this is ready to send to my editor. Now, I want you to notice something else in this one is that I've added down this side plot lines by character. Now, a lot of people do it this way. If you have several characters in your book and you want to make sure that you're following each of their stories, you can use these plot lines to plot out each character's journey. Okay, and I'm going to show you kind of how that works here in a little bit. Now, you can also, up here is where you create those attributes. Now notice I've got weather and point of view. Now I can add anything to this that I want, but remember, if you delete this, if I delete this and that point of view thing I created in that other file we looked at, it disappears, it's gone. And everything that you've entered in any of those is gone. So remember that about attributes. And then remember, we talked about adding templates, and you can do the exact same thing with something you built out incredibly thoroughly or whatever you want to do. Okay. In this case, you can see that instead of beats, I've got acts, chapters, and scenes. Okay, and this particular, I've just done that for the Three Little Pigs to show you that you can do different things than the way that I do them. Now, normally you can flip your timeline. You can't do that when you have this act structure enabled. I'll actually show you that in another file here in a minute. And you can also change the way you view this act structure when you've added that on. So you can add it as a tabbed and default. And I'm not going to show you those things in real detail now because they get a little bit complicated. Maybe we have time for that in the Q&A. Now, the cool thing as well is you can change your zoom level. So I can change it to where I have a medium zoom level. Now, I know I've zoomed out. I can still hover over these scene cards and see what's inside, but they're just smaller. So if I have 30 chapters, which I often have 30 to 40 chapters in my books, then I can see the whole thing all laid out. Now, if you're really writing an epic, You can go even smaller. Now notice I still hover over these things. I can still see what's inside the scenes, but they're just smaller. Some people use this because the way they structure their plot lines, you can actually see the shape of the story when you're zoomed out that far. Okay, so it's kind of a cool way to look at things. It really just depends on how you want to look at your story. Plottr is super flexible. In other words, you can do kind of really whatever works for you, right? Now, these arrows up at the top that you can see there, you're not going to see a real dramatic shift here, obviously, because we have a relatively short story. But one thing I do want to point out that I always point out is the middle. Okay, so when I'm working on a long book, I'll hit mid like this. If my midpoint of my plot is not in the middle of my screen, when I hit middle of my plot, then my pacing is probably off. Okay, so that's a way for me to look at that. Now we're going to talk about search and filter when we get to some other stuff, when we've looked at some other parts of Plottr. Okay, so we're going to do that. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is the outline tab. Okay, so we looked at the timeline. This is kind of what your timeline looks like. Oh, one more thing before we leave here. If you want to move scene cards, you can just drag and drop them. So you decide they belong somewhere else. Let's say you're writing an epic fantasy and you want to move this scene 1 to scene 37. Well, I can go down here and move it wherever I want using this drop down menu. And there's some other ways you can use that too as well that are a little more advanced things. But for the basics of this, we'll stick it with it that way. Okay, now we're going to look at the outline tab. Now, let me show you what I do with this outline tab. The outline tab is just like the timeline tab. You can still see everything that you can see in that tab. You can create some chapter summaries and act summaries here if you want to do that. Again, you can still see the characters, the places are still tagged in these as well. Okay, so you can come through and you can click in here and do the same editing that you could do in the timeline. And whatever you edit in here will show up on the timeline side as well, right? So it's all synced together. But what I use this the outline section for is to filter by plot line. So as I showed you, I have different plot lines when I have my mysteries, right? But when I have those plot lines, I need to make sure that the subplot hangs together as a story of its own. So if the novel wasn't there, would the subplot still make sense? So in this case, I'm going to illustrate this by grabbing the wolf story. Now, what I should be able to do, in theory, if I've written this well, and I've plotted well, is I should be able to eliminate all the other characters and say, if I told this from the wolf's point of view, would this story make sense? And I need to make sure that I've wrapped up all the loops that I may have created with the wolf, that any clue. So I specifically use this for my clues timeline. I want to see that I've wrapped up every clue that I've planted throughout the book. So I come during the revision process to this section, I filter by plotline and only show the clues. And I scroll through this as I'm going through my manuscript and make sure that I've taken care of every one of those clues and not left any loose ends. Okay, there may be other ways that you can do this with your story as well, but filtering by plotline is extremely valuable. Now, notice it does tell you some things have disappeared. So it does give you this nice little yellow warning that tells you, hey, you filtered your outline, so you don't think you just deleted half of your project, because that could be a nightmare. I've lost a novel once. If you meet me at a conference anytime, I will tell you that story, but in a bar, and you have to buy me lots of drinks because it's a nightmare. But anyway, but okay, so that's the outline section. We're going to talk about the search and this little export button over here in a little bit. Okay, the next thing is notes. Now, here's what notes are for. This is what I use notes for. This is any research or anything that you do that is not related to characters and places. You see that we'll get to those. We have a place for characters, we have a place for setting, but this is for additional notes. So let's say I've researched a new weapon and I want some information here. Okay, I add it here. Now you'll notice my attributes on notes, like there aren't very many attributes that you would want necessarily on your notes that you want as a part of every single note, but there can be, especially if you're watching, if you're writing nonfiction. One of those things is a source, right? I need to know where I got this information from. So I will add that. In this section, I will often add a hyperlink to that source. Okay, and I'll show you how else I use hyperlinks as well. I can add pictures in here. I can add thumbnails, or I can add an actual picture down in this part here. And this happens to be the source of that particular picture. Okay, now notice I can filter this by characters and places, just like I could before. So I could add the mother's house here as a place. But what else can I filter by? Well, I can filter by books. So I've got a plan here, and I'm going to create more books in the Three Little Pigs series. I'm going to create The Return of Mother Pig and The Wolf Strikes Back. Okay, so I'm only going to tag notes that are related to the Three Little Pigs here. So I can use this little filter button to filter only by the books that I tagged something for. So I can look at just the notes from the Three Little Pigs, and I don't have to look at every note I've created for my entire series. And we're going to look at what that series looks like and how you create those books here in a little bit. Okay, but this being able to filter just by book enables you to not have to look at everything that you researched for an entire, let's say, a 25 book series that I'll tell you about in a little bit, because that means that you have a lot of stuff there. Right? You've done a lot of research. You don't need to look at all of it at once. You just need to look at what's from the book that you're working on right now. But you can also filter by character or anything else. So I can say, I want to filter only notes that involve pig number 1. Right? So if I've done some extensive research on that character, I can filter by that. Now, this is where things start to get really cool. Not that notes aren't really cool. And in notes as well, you can create categories. I didn't show you that aspect, but I'll show you here in characters. Now, I've created here for main, supporting, other. In my mysteries, I create the main characters, the victim, supporting characters, the antagonist allies. I create a number of character and minor characters as well, but character categories that enable me to understand my story better. Now look up at the top here at this cool little thing. When I click on series, I see all of the characters in my entire series. Okay, now I can go in here, I can add a thumbnail, I can add pictures down here. What I usually tell people is if I need a lot of pictures of my character, I add a link to either a folder that has a lot of those pictures in it, or to their IMDb profile, if I'm basing it on a real actor or actress or whatever the case may be, right? So that I can click on that when I'm in the writing process, because in my writing process, I have Scrivener open on one window, Plottr open on the other. And so if I'm looking at anything that's related to research or my characters or whatever, I'm looking in Plottr, I can click on this link, go directly to those pictures and not get distracted by the rest of the internet. At least I hope that I don't get distracted by the rest of the internet, because I am like a squirrel, and maybe you are not, but I am like a squirrel. So, and you can do this for all of your different characters. Category main, short description. We've got some attributes here in this particular case that we've created, and those are like the type of house, the role, the gender, the primary trait. Now, there may be other attributes you want to know about every single one of your characters. Now we also have character templates, because remember, attributes are global. Those are to every single character. Well, I don't want to know a huge amount of detail about every single character in my books, right? I don't need to fill out that character part of the template. I don't need to know about the guard that let me in the room and was on screen for 30 seconds. I don't need to know his religious preference and his mother and his upbringing and his psychological profile. However, for my other characters, I might. You notice that you can create your own templates up there. We can talk about that in a little bit, but we also have over 20 starter templates. Now, what are these about? Well, there's the character bio that has kind of everything you could imagine that you would want to know about your character, right? We have some D&D character sheets. If you're a D&D type person or you know a DM, they can now plan their campaigns in Plottr, which is really freaking fun. A friend of mine does that. We've got goal, motivation, conflict, which is one of my favorites, external and internal goals and motivations and conflicts for your characters. These help you build your characters into what they actually are. But another one of my favorites is the Enneagram. If you understand the Enneagram, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, go research it. It's a fantastic way to, first of all, get to know yourself better, but also your characters. Now, notice when we click on these things, we get like some hints here. type of personality based on the Enneagram test, and then core desire and core fear, which are two big base things involved in the Enneagram. But you say, well, I don't know anything about that. Well, you just click this little information button here, and it will take you out to the actual place where you will find more information about the Enneagram. And if I hover over it, it'll tell me what that URL is, the Enneagram Institute and the type descriptions, right? And it's really helpful if you know this about your characters, because you can do a lot of really cool things with that. But that's not the only one. If you prefer Clifton's strengths, or if you prefer the birth order, or cognitive distortions, or Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Myers-Briggs, whatever your personal preference is. A favorite with romance writers right now is our online dating profile. Basically, you're creating a Tinder for your character. What would their Tinder profile look like? It's really, really handy, because if you go in and answer all these questions about your main two characters in a romance, you will know a lot about them. And it will really help you in writing them and making richer characters. So this is it's a really cool tool. I tend to use this more in the revision process after I've gotten to know my character by actually writing the book. But there's a number of ways and places that you can use that. So really kind of whatever works for you. And then you'll notice the other thing about these three little pigs is, so the wolf right now is kind of a main character in the Three Little Pigs, right? In the series. In the Three Little Pigs, we don't have him categorized, but really he's kind of an antagonist, but we'll just call him a main character there as well. But in the Return of Mother Pig, maybe he becomes a supporting character instead. And you see how so that stays different throughout the series. So let's say one of your characters is a minor character in book 1, and then suddenly they're your protagonist in book 3. Well, through using this tool of the characters by series, or characters by book, you can show that character growth over time and the fact that they changed into something else. Okay. Again, you can tag by the books. You can tag by some different user-created tags that we're going to look at in a minute. But you can look at all of the different ones and notice not all of the pigs are in this particular book. So I haven't added them all to that particular book. This one's just going to be about Mother Pig, who's going to become our main character, and Pig 3 and the wolf become secondary characters. Okay, so because my series has evolved and changed, I'm allowed to do that through using Plottr. Now, places. I love places. And I love the way we can do settings. So you create categories for settings. So I've created murder scene and victim's house. Big surprise. Mystery writer is going to select those categories. Now I've got some attributes here for that settings as well. Settings, sometimes you will want some attributes like this. If you are a sci-fi writer, maybe you want to know what planet this is on. Okay, or what country it's in if you're writing a fantasy, or whatever the case may be. You may have attributes you want to know about every single one of your places. Now, in this case, we want to know the owner, whether or not it blows away, and what it symbolizes. And we're going to be really boring, and I'm going to type Earth here as my planet. Okay, but the other thing that I do here is you'll notice I've added a short description notes here. It has a chimney, but I've also added this right here, this Google Maps link. Now, I use this all the time because in mysteries, I base a lot of my settings on real places in real cities, right? But I don't want to use the name of that place necessarily, because nobody wants somebody to die at their cafe. That's not what they want to be famous for. Okay, so they really don't like it when you do that. But I will use a Google Maps link to the street view of that place. Then I can click on that link, describe that to my readers very effectively, and pop right back into my document without ever leaving that writing space and that right headspace and focus space for me. And that's the way it often works for me. Okay. Now, tags. What are tags for? Tags are to add an extra layer of organization to your project in whatever way that you would like. But it's just a layer of organization that's not covered by characters or places. It's something else you want to tag for. One of the ones I use all the time is slow, medium, and fast. Now, why do I do that, you suppose? Well, because when I'm going through a revision process, I will read the scene that I created again, and I will create a summary for it. And I will be brutally honest with myself about the pacing of that summary of that scene. Is it slow, medium, or fast? Then I can come over to my timeline and look at it. And if I have 3 slow scenes in a row, I am in trouble. As a mystery writer and a thriller writer, I've already lost my readers. They're gone. They're off on Google. They're watching Netflix, whatever it is that they're doing, but they're not reading my book, which is not what I want. Okay, so that's what tags are for. But you can use exposition. You can use the status. I showed you that I use colors for this, but you could use tags for it as well. You could use it to tag different themes, whatever you want to do. Okay, so there's all kinds of things that you could do with that. Okay. And you can create your own categories, whatever it is that you want, theme, pacing, other, whatever you would like to do. Okay, but it's just for you to add a layer of organization to that. Okay, so if we go back to our timeline, we can look at a couple more things that we didn't look at before. First of all, we can look at filtering by tags. So I can go, well, I want to filter by slow, right? Now I've only, in this case, labeled one scene as slow. Now that's probably not 100% accurate if I look at my work when I'm done writing my rough draft, but let's pretend that it is. This is the only scene that shows up. Now notice the other scenes are there, but they're kind of faded into the background, right? You can see them, you can see that they're there, but they're faded into the background, okay? And I can filter by anything basically that I've filled in here, and I can filter by more than one thing. But I can filter by what happened at the brick house, right? And all the scenes that happened at the brick house. He made a house out of bricks, you know, and then we have all these other scenes over here that include the brick house when the other pigs run to the brick house because their houses have been blown over, right? So we have that. You can filter by almost anything. Now, you can also search. Now we are working on an advanced search and replace for this, but at the moment, what you can do is you search by, let's say you have a character name you want to change, you search by Wolf, and you can see all the instances of where Wolf appears. Now there's no, you notice these other scenes have completely disappeared in this case of search, because all you want to see is what you searched for. Okay, now, so eventually, relatively soon, actually, with our next update, we're going to have a search and replace that's going to come out. Okay, so that'll help you, that'll make that part faster. Okay, so what does all this mean? I'm going to back out to a couple other things really quick. The first one is a series. Okay, so this one is one I just created as a test, as a blank, to show you what I was doing, right? But we have the 3 little pigs, which we were looking at before. Now we come back out to this project, we have the return of Mother Pig. The return of Mother Pig has its own timeline. Now, in this particular case, in this timeline, we've decided that we're going to use a plot structure from the beginning to look at. And in this case, we're going to look at the hero's journey. Now, if we click into this scene card, what does this tell me about the hero's journey? Well, if you're familiar with this plot structure, even if you're not, you'll get the idea fairly quickly. This section introduces the reader to the hero. We give you some bullet points of things you should consider. We also give you a breakdown. Like this is the first, Act 1 is usually about the first 25% of the story. Ordinary World should take approximately the first 12% of the story. Now, I always add a caveat here when I talk about these templates. Writers, please don't do math. These are approximate values. If your Act 1 takes up 28% of your story, no one is going to die. Or maybe they will if you're writing mysteries, but it's not going to matter. But the Ordinary World taking 12% of your story, that means a range from like 10 to 20%-ish is where your Ordinary World should fall, right? Don't do math and try to hit these targets exactly. These are not exact figures. They're approximations, and many of them are based on the study of story structure, which I've done a lot of, and where these things usually occur approximately in a book. So don't do math. Okay, enough of my preaching. So, but I don't, you notice that this says add your details above this line. I don't do that. When I'm planning, I come down here and add my theme here. Now, why do I do that? Well, because if I change my mind about what plot structure I want, then I don't have to copy and paste things out of here, because I can do that. And this is what's beautiful, is another way you can access these templates is right here. So I can add a plot line. In doing so, I can add a template. Now you can see mine, or you can see that we have over 30 starter templates in Plottr. in pretty much any genre and type that you would like. We even have some poetry ones in there. We have a horror beat sheet. We have simple ones. We have complex ones. We have this one that's called the Sleuth's Journey that may have been adapted from the Hero's Journey for Mysteries by someone you are listening to right now. It's possible. So I may know a little bit about that one. But there's the simple story spine, 8 little questions that you're going to answer, versus the Story Engine's blueprint, which has 40 different scene cards and all kinds of things, right? But to keep this simple, I'm going to say, I decided this isn't a hero's journey. I decided the action adventure plot fits better. So I'm going to choose this. Okay. Now what I can do is I can take my scenes that I'm creating and see which one of these they line up with the best. Now notice for the scenes, I can also use a template when I'm creating the scene. So I can say, I want to start with goal, motivation, and conflict. And then I'm going to put in the scene 2. Now, I can move these all around. Now, if I want to as well, let's say I have more than one scene in chapter 1, I can stack them like so. And to clean up my view, I can actually collapse that stack or expand it. Okay, so that's what happens within a project. You can have several books, each with their own timeline. Notice that the wolf has its own timeline, completely different colors, completely different things, right? But there's more that you can do here. You can also do a series view and create an overall plot line for your series, which I highly recommend that you do. I have actually done a lot of story analysis on television and book series on purpose. It sounds like English homework that would torture some of you, but I do it for fun. And it's very interesting to see how many of them actually have a series arc that covers all of the books. And you can point to the midpoint of the series as well as the midpoint of the book, and you can break that down even further, and it's really super fascinating. But for you, this is a great place to track details of what happens in each book so that you can go back and reference it really quickly without having to go back and read the other book, or go back even into the other book's timeline. If I'm writing The Return of Mother Pig and I go, what was that thing that happened in the Three Little Pigs? Well, I could go back to the Three Little Pigs and look all the way through this timeline, this complicated timeline about what happened there. Or I can come up to my series view, read a summary of that book, and I can see exactly what I need to see. Now, you can put book covers here. Once you publish these, that's actually really fun. I have a series that has 25 books in one Plottr file. 16 of them have been published, so there are 16 cool looking book covers on each of these books, and that lets me know, hey man, you've accomplished something. Those books are done. That's really cool. So that's a lot of fun. All right, so let's go back. We're going to go back actually to the Three Little Pigs, to the timeline view. Now, we talked about some other things that you can do. One of the other places you can access templates is on your dashboard, which is in your top right hand corner. You can create a brand new file from a template. You can create a blank file, you can open an existing file, or you can create one from a template. This is another place that you can start with those plot templates. Okay, so you can start the project using one of these straight from your dashboard as well. So you can do that. Okay, you can also import files. You can import from Scrivener now, and you can import from Snowflake Pro. Now, the reason I talked to you about being able to import from Scrivener before we talk about another feature is importing from Scrivener, it does need to be in a certain format. And I'm going to talk to you about, if you're familiar with Scrivener, what you would use is the novel format, not the novel with parts. We're working on being able to import that and make that come into Plottr a little more nicely than it does right now. But right now it'll come in kind of in an odd way, and you'll have to move things around. But if you have started your project in Plottr and you have exported it, because we don't write in Plottr. Plottr is a planning software. Now, technically you could, the scene cards don't have word limits. You could write in Plottr, but I just feel like exporting it to edit and stuff like that would be kind of a nightmare. So I don't do that. However, you can export to Microsoft Word or Scrivener. Now, if you click on just these, you're going to export everything that's in your timeline and all of your characters and all of your places. And they're going to go to, in Word, they're going to go to headings, different headings. In Scrivener, they're going to go into the appropriate places in Scrivener. However, I never use any of these, either of these two things. Why? Because I'm a writer and so I'm a control freak. So I come in and to the advanced export options, and I pick and choose what I'm going to export. And this is really what I recommend that most people do. Now, you may want to export your notes, characters, and places to Scrivener. I do not. The reason is I have Plottr open on one screen, Scrivener on the other, kind of like I talked about earlier, and I look back and forth to find my characters and places so I don't ever leave that writing space in Scrivener. I also don't export all of my plot lines. If I have a template over here or whatever the case may be, the only things I want exported to Scrivener is my main plot, my subplot, and my clues. That's all I want in Scrivener. I don't want the rest. So I check which ones I want to export. Now, if you are a person who wants to export everything, which is completely understandable, you can do that with Word, and it'll create the headings, different heading styles, and then you can use the navigation pane to move back and forth in your book, and it's actually very effective. I generally do not export a title page myself, but you can. I create that later myself using a completely different program. But the thing I rarely ever export to Word is the images. And the reason is images just take up space in Word and they're kind of distracting. Okay, so I don't do it. You may want to. Okay, now once you've chosen what you want to do, you just hit export right here, and it's going to create a separate file that you can actually write your stuff in. Okay, so that's how that works. And that's how you can access the different templates that we have in Plottr. This is the ways that you can keep track of your series Bible and all of that wonderful stuff. Now, for just a second, I'm going to stop sharing that screen. I'm going to pop back into my presentation so we can kind of review all that stuff I talked about, because I know I talked about a lot of things because I tend to do that. I'm pretty passionate, as you might have noticed, about plotting and Plottr. And that's because it really has changed my life. Plottr helps you craft better stories faster. You can create your overall book and series arcs. These are super, super important. Again, I do a lot of this in revision, and you can ask me questions about that in a few minutes. We can spot and avoid inconsistencies, plot, revise, and organize with templates. I usually use templates twice, once in the plotting process, once in the revision process. We can talk about that as well. You can track character details across your books, which is really great. I used to have to go back and read chapter 2 in book 1 to find out what color Susie's eyes were, and that never worked for me because inevitably I got distracted about something I should have changed back in chapter 2, and now I'm down the Reddit thread and I know everything there is to know about that particular pistol, but I still don't know what color my character's eyes were because now I've forgotten after I spent half an hour on the internet researching something I shouldn't be doing right now. Right, good grief. Plottr also works for pantsers, for discovery writers. It works as there's a process called postplotting that people use. They tear apart their draft and put it on plot lines and use that to revise their first drafts, or use it in the revision process, or they do it as they go. They kind of plot as they go. Some people just use Plottr for managing their story and series Bibles, and they do not use it for anything else. They don't ever use the timeline. There are friends of mine that look at that timeline section and they're like, nope, never going to happen. I'm just going to use this to manage my series Bibles and my story information for my characters. It's fine, whatever way you want to use it. Another way is tracking tentpole events, which is usually when you use a very simple plot formula that has 4 or 5 things you need to know, and that's all you know when you first start your draft. Now, we have additional resources for pantsers. I've done a lot of interviews on YouTube with different writers about how they use Plottr. These are 2 people who are pantsers, active pantsers, and they use Plottr for different stages of their writing. Okay, so you can check those out on our YouTube channel, which is linked down there below. Now, it can also help nonfiction writers. I use this for nonfiction all the time. You develop your book story, use it to outline and revise. You can track people and places, and you can consolidate research. If you want more information on how to use this for nonfiction, we have a couple of videos on Plottr, but we're also developing a new nonfiction mode for Plottr that'll specifically work, that you can toggle a switch and it'll specifically work better for nonfiction writers. Okay, so and I'm really excited about this. I write a lot of nonfiction as well as fiction, And I've written a lot of books, guys. It's crazy. I'm really tired. But anyway, but you can check out these YouTube videos, and we've talked specifically about how we use it, including with the guy from Reedsy. Now, our latest coming features, Act Structure 1.0, which is recent release, character by books. You can import from Scrivener, search, duplicate, and transfer. And the new plot and character templates, we're adding these all the time. People will ask us sometimes about specific plot templates. Understand that some of those are under copyright, and we cannot just add them to Plottr. But we do have a community area where you can add community templates and share them with your friends. And so we just advise you when you're doing that to ensure that you have the rights to share those and do so, but we can't put them in the paid version of Plottr for copyright reasons. We have all kinds of tools you need to stay organized and inspired, map out stories before, during, and after writing, track story details. We've got over 20 character templates, over 30 plot templates, and those are growing all the time. Okay, so all kinds of cool stuff like that. We have weekly live training sessions. Sometimes I'm the one that pops in and does those. Sometimes it's somebody else. But we have, those are like more personal. They're usually smaller. You can ask all kinds of questions. We have tons of video tutorials and documentation if you don't like videos. We've got interviews and deep dives on YouTube where we dive into certain templates, or we've done interviews with authors that use Plottr. You can see how somebody else is doing this. We have a super active Facebook group. If you get in that Facebook group and you think I might be able to answer your question, you can tag me. If you look in that Facebook group, you're going to see tags of me all over the place, because I'll come in and answer your questions, because this is what I do. I want to see you be successful. We have a public roadmap. Most of the features we've added to Plottr have come from people's suggestions. Okay. As I said, we've got global search and replace coming, advanced world building, NonFiction mode, and some more other really cool stuff coming just this year. Like we got some amazing plans for Plottr, and there's some cool stuff happening. Now you might ask, obviously at this point, if Plottr is right for you. If you're a visual thinker, I am very visual in planning my stories. I was using corkboards and whiteboards before I used Plottr, and a bunch of other tools that didn't work really well. So if you're visual like me and you like to see your story laid out, this is really helpful. If you'd like to make your process more organized, or you just need a better way to track your characters and places across books and series. I know writers that have paid their fans to create a series Bible for them because they didn't start doing it at the beginning. And then once they've got this long series, it's driving them crazy to have to go back and read their old books, because nobody wants to read their old books, trust me. And if you worry about inconsistencies and plot holes across books, now here's our special offer, and I'll go through this really fast. We'll drop this in the chat. What I will tell you is there's a couple type of questions before we get to Q&A that I'm not terribly good at answering. That's like questions like, if I already have Plottr, can I upgrade to this for that? Yes, you can, but contact support@plottr.com. I can't really answer those questions very well for you on anything about pricing or things like that. The other thing I can't answer is, I will confess to you right now that I write words and not code. So if you have a question about what the platform is built on and the little coding things behind it, I have no clue. I just tell the developers I want that, they go away, they make it happen. I push a button, poof, it happens. So that's what I really want to, I don't know how to write code. But anyway, our special offer, 10% discount off Plottr Classic. This is the offline version. I'll tell you about the web version in a minute and what the differences are. So you have choices. And I always explain when we talk about annual subscriptions. So this is not like the annual subscription that after a year, if you don't pay your renewal, suddenly Plottr disappears from your desktop and sucks away all your files, and you're just very sad. No, all that is you don't get updates. Like if you, at the end of the year, if you don't renew, you'll just stay on whatever version of Plottr you happen to be on right now. Now, obviously, we add all kinds of things all the time, and just normal software security updates and stuff like that. So I highly recommend that you get the updates, but it isn't, you aren't just suddenly going to lose all of your Plottr files if you miss your due date or whatever. But a better option, obviously, is to buy lifetime if you think that you're going to use Plottr for life. Now, the difference between 1 device and 3 devices, this is your lifetime, not your device's lifetime. So if your computer dies, you contact support@plottr.com. There's a way to do it on your dashboard, but if you can't figure it out, contact support@plottr.com, and they will help you move your Plottr license from one device to another. So this is how many devices you'll be using at one time for plotting your novel. So a lot of people, they just use a desktop. In that case, you only need one. I travel a lot, so I use like 4. So, you know, that's why I have the web version, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Okay. But so this is the lifetime options. This is the link. We'll drop that in the chat, and make sure that you have that link. If you go to this link directly, you'll get this promo pricing. Okay. Now there's a 10% discount off of Plottr Pro, which is a big deal. A lot of times we don't offer a discount on Plottr Pro, but we're doing it this time. This is the online version. The difference with Plottr Pro is this is a web version of Plottr, so you can access it in your browser, which means there are no device limits. It means that everything syncs across all of your devices, no matter what device you open Plottr on, and you can have the same file open on 2 different devices at the same time, which means that you can also collaborate with other Plottr Pro users. So if you have an editor or a co-writer that's also using Plottr Pro, instead of sending files back and forth, you can share the same file almost like you're working in Google Docs. Okay, so you can be making changes, you can see each other making changes in real time. First of all, it's fantastic. I use it with a lot of my editing clients, with a co-writer that I'm working with. And having no device limits, especially when I'm traveling, is super important to me. If somebody has a question about something, I can literally log into my Plottr Pro from any browser on any computer, anywhere, and get the information that I need. Okay, and so with that, we're going to move back to questions. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing that screen. We'll share that link in the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen so that if you have questions, that it'll be easier if I show you in Plottr, I can jump in and do that. Okay?
It looks like a lot of the questions actually are not necessarily directly related to like something that you can show in Plottr, but more like bigger picture questions about it.
Sure.
So the first question, I think you showed this question came in before the demonstration, but you showed how to do I think you showed in the demo how to do multiple storylines, right? Because the first question is if you have a story with multiple storylines, how do you like to proceed?
Yeah, and I kind of showed that, but there's ways through tags and stuff to connect those 2 stories. My latest book that showed on the slide there, Teaching Moments, is a double plot story that the plots come together in the end, and that was kind of complicated to write, and Plottr was extremely helpful for that. So yeah.
Pat, I'm just going to hop in and answer your question because it's right at the bottom of it. If you go to the website that he just sent us to, 2 of the options say you can use it offline. You don't have to be on the internet to use it. So, okay, or all of them I think have that option. But let's see. I say Viver's question, I think you also answered. She's later on in the presentation, she'll be doing 3 series, each having 8 to 9 titles. She wants the character web to move across. Can Plottr basically contain all of that many books and titles and series?
Yeah, one of my series has 50 books total. 25 of them are already plotted. And I'll tell you, it's called the Capital City Murders series. So you can probably figure out why there's 50 books, because that's math even writers can engage in. There's 50 states, 50 state capitals, 50 different murders. So you can imagine that within each of those books, there are individual settings in each of those cities. So having 50 different books, there are probably 200 and some settings, vast number of characters. So yeah, you can contain all of that in one Plottr file, and there's some really great ways to organize it.
Awesome. Can you import a 16,000 word manuscript right into Plottr? Donna wants to know.
Not recommended. So when you're importing from Scrivener, what you're importing is the scene cards and your summaries on those cards. You're not importing all of the text. We cannot import from Word right now. And the reason is Microsoft doesn't share their API with little guys like us. So we can't do that. And it also would require some special formatting on your part to get only what you wanted. So I would not import an entire manuscript into Plottr. You just want scene summaries, not the entire thing.
Right, because we're not actually writing the book there. We're just outlining and organizing it there. Okay. How is this applicable for nonfiction?
Oh, which I think I kind of answered that,
Yes.
but I'll answer it a little deeper by saying this: nonfiction is still a story. Doesn't matter what kind of nonfiction you're writing. If you're writing a memoir, it's a story. If it's not a story, it's not ever going to sell. I can just tell you that right now. I do a lot of ghostwriting for people, but I pick and choose who I ghostwrite their memoirs for, because some people don't have a story. They have a series of interesting events that have happened in their life, but a story involves tension and conflict and some kind of story structure. And it usually needs to have a beginning and then circle back around to that ordinary world, just like a fiction story would. Okay, so that's really, I mean, it's a story. Nonfiction is still a story. Your hero is the reader. Like if you're writing inspirational fiction, what they're doing is you're identifying a problem in their life that your book is going to help them with, and you're taking them on a journey where you show them more about that problem, show them some of the tri-fails they might experience, then you reach a climax and you tell them, here is the solution. The solution is yada, whatever you're talking about. And then the denouement is telling them how they're going to return to their ordinary world and use that to solve whatever their problem is. So it's still a problem solution formula. And so often I'll tell people to use something similar to the hero's journey, but we do have some nonfiction templates specifically coming out and a nonfiction mode that'll help with that. But you can do it as Plottr is now. Use the hero's journey and your reader is the hero.
All right, that also knocked out Jennifer's, which was any tips for using Plottr for memoir writing. So great answer there. Let's see. You may have shown this already. We got a couple of questions asking about in the templates, the weather box. Is it changeable for each scene or is it static throughout the story? So they want to know how to change it for different scenes.
So like that weather box that I had in there, you can enter any text in there that you want, and you can filter by that. But if you change that, like if you say, I don't want weather in this scene, and you delete that, it'll delete it in all of them because that's an attribute, which is global. So think of attributes as global, templates as individual scenes. So if you want things you only want on individual scenes, you can actually create your own scene template that's specific for your book. And as you saw, when I was going through, you probably saw that there were several that said my templates, like in the plot templates, and because I've taken plot templates and adapted them specifically for series that I'm writing. Well, you probably don't need that. Like, that's probably not exceptionally helpful to someone else, right? Because it's so personalized for that series. But it keeps me from redoing that part of that template every single time I write a book. So that's how I do it. You can do it any way that you want. You can recreate those with every book if you want, but I don't do it that way. So
Great. All right. I'm knocking out some of these questions that you answered in the thing. Okay, let's see. Did you say what versions of Word is supported for exporting?
As far as I know, I don't know what the earliest version of Word it supports, but it supports pretty much all the ones that Microsoft supports right now, is the way I would put that. So if Microsoft supports it, the export from Plottr will work.
Okay.
So same thing with Scrivener. It'll export. It actually exports to a little older version, and Scrivener will ask you when you open it to update it to the newer version if you're on a Mac. If you're on a PC, I'm not sure that's. I think it may be on the same version that PC is on now. I'm not sure. I haven't kept track of the differences between those two because I'm an Apple guy. But yeah.
So there's a couple of questions on exporting, but anytime you make changes, you just re-export, whether it's to Scrivener or to Word or anything like that, you just re-export again.
It doesn't sync directly across, in other words. We would love for it to do that with Scrivener. It's just not quite possible yet. And that's another one of those coding questions that when I ask them about that, the coders get that blank look on their face that, tells you they're going to disappoint you, but they don't want to really, so yeah.
Let's see. If you start with your nonfiction, will you be able to transfer your information easily to the nonfiction mode when it comes out? Oh, that's a good question.
Yep, you will. It's basically a toggle that you'll find in your dashboard that you can switch for that particular project. You'll just be able to toggle to nonfiction and transfer it over. It'll all transfer over automatically. So.
Great. If I have a manuscript I want to apply Plottr to, will I start in Plottr and paste parts where they go? Huh.
Yeah, so if you have a manuscript already, what you would do is create plot summary or scene summaries in Plottr. This is the way I do it. If I have an editing client that doesn't use Plottr, by the end of our editing process, they have a Plottr file. Because basically I tear their book apart and put it on a Plottr timeline. And part of the reason is you can visually see when there's a plot hole. So I can get them on a Zoom call and say, look, plot hole. And they can't deny it because it's like right in front of them. It's visual. And it's one of the advantages of a visual software is they can't argue with me and say, well, I meant to say this. Well, I don't care what you meant to say. This is what you say. And there's a plot hole here. So you can do the same thing for yourself and save yourself a lot of developmental editing money. Because I tell people you can pay me to do this or you can do it yourself before you approach me, and doing it yourself before you approach me is a way cheaper option. So, there's that.
All right, so I'm trying to weed through some of these. I'd like to actually give a shot at answering Cadence's question here. Not because I want to try, because I have a similar thing going on in my brain, and I want to kind of voice this in a way and get your answer back from my response to see if I have this right. So her big question is that basically she's overwhelmed because she has a lot of tools and she's not sure what to use when. She's got, she writes in Word, she uses Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly, she edits in Pro Writing Aid, then she sends to Atticus to format. Okay, so that's the big picture stuff. She's also used Scrivener, she also has WordCraft. So basically she doesn't know when to use with what tools and what on all of this kind of stuff. So I want to try and give it a shot to make sure that I understand it, because I'm also like in kind of the same boat here. And that is that this tool, it helps us. It's not the grammar stuff. It's not the writing tool. It is purely the organization and plotting, so that before you get to all those other tools, you are getting all your story in there so that you can make sure it's including all the things that the book should have. It's following all those templates. Then you write the book elsewhere based on the tool and the organization that you've used. And then the things like Pro Writing Aid, Grammarly, all of those things, Atticus, those come in way after. But this is the first step to help you organize, outline, create, and get that initial plan for your book, so that you've written a book that meets all the requirements of the genre and the norms and the beats and all those things. Is that?
That's actually a good overview, but there are some people that use it more in the revision process than you do the planning process before it goes to Pro Writing Aid. So first of all, I'll give you two answers to this. I'll give you a quick description of my own writing process. So I plan in Plottr, but I'm not an architect. People are like, you're the Plottr guy, you're an architect. No, I'm not actually. When I plan in Plottr, most of the time, the most important thing in each scene card is a writing prompt for what I'm going to write that day. That's usually a paragraph, few sentences, that's all it is, right? Then I actually create another plot line under that one that's called what I actually wrote. At the end of my writing session, I put a summary of what I actually wrote, because oddly enough, like pretty much every other writer I've ever met, what I actually write doesn't always exactly line up with what I plan to write, right? So at the end, when I finished writing the book, after I planned, but primarily with writing prompts, it's pretty loose. And I know a lot about my characters, but the plan is pretty loose. I come in and I write, I've got another plot line that says what I actually wrote. Then I bring back in the plot template. I compare the plot template, what I actually wrote, and what I plan to write. And I use it to check my English homework, because writing for a living is like giving yourself English homework every day for the rest of your life. And which for some people is a nightmare. For me, it's delightful. But anyway, so I compare those three things to see how did I do? Like, how did I do? Right. And then is when, and by that point, I've exported it to Word, because I write in Scrivener, I edit in Word. Okay. And there's lots of reasons I don't edit in Scrivener. So I edit in Word, and then that's when I start to use those tools like Pro Writing Aid, AutoCrit, Marlowe, whatever it is that you got going on. All of those tools have different uses and they're very useful, but they're useful in that revision process. Then I happen to format in Vellum because I'm a Mac guy. If you don't have Vellum, Atticus, and you're not a Mac guy, Atticus is actually a great choice. But all of those tools serve a different purpose, right? And they all serve a different purpose. But when I tell people that process, they're like, can I copy your process? Sure, knock yourself out, because you're not going to. Because what's going to happen and it happens with every writer, is that you find what I call your and then moment. You say, I started with this process, and then you proceed to tell me how you made it your own. The
Right.
most important moment in any software you use, really anything that you do, anything in your writing career, is your and then moment. I started with Facebook ads like so-and-so told me, and then I moved to this. Right? That and then moment is the moment when you make that your own. You are going to develop your own writing process. It took me a long time to do it, and mine is always evolving and changing as I learn more about myself, learn more about my writing and what I want to do. Okay, so that for me is my process. That's my process. It's ever evolving and changing, but that's the highlight, the high part of my process. Your process will probably look different than mine, and that's cool. Because there is one rule of writing. Everybody will tell you writing, there's no rule, right? But there is a rule to writing. Everybody ready for the one rule for writing? It has to work.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
the only
exactly.
rule.
Whatever
It's the
works
only
for
rule.
you.
It has to work.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, that it is a little bit taking her question and spelling it out, like it is a bit overwhelming, because yes, there's lots of pieces of the process and lots of steps that you go through and lots of tools that you have to use, and they all have their own unique function, which it'd be lovely if we could find someone who could create a tool that could do all of these things for us in one place. But I'm not sure that it would work, because the beauty of these tools is that each person, each company hones right in on that piece that you need. You guys are great at the organization and the plotting part. Pro Writing Aid is great at the AI around the self editing, all those kinds of things. So anyway, that to say, like, for now,
yeah, usually
know,
it's a software that tries to do everything isn't really that good at anything. Exactly like you are as a person. You specialize. Why do I specialize in mysteries and thrillers? That's my voice and what I like. I could write romance, technically. Would it be very good? Maybe. Would I enjoy myself? No, probably not.
it
Probably not.
leads to a bigger picture, which is something that we actually just had a conversation about for next year for the Women in Publishing Summit, actually outlining the timeline of the tools and when to use them and how to use them, so that people, because that's the overwhelming part. And we see that in this question, and even working it through my head, when do I use what, and what can I use with it, and those kinds of things. So I'm excited about digging more into that. But she did have one other question at the very end of this that I think we need to get in here, is that, will your advanced world building be like WorldCraft? Are you familiar with WorldCraft? It's another tool that she's using.
Not super familiar with WorldCraft, but what I do know is, so part of the issue right now is we have characters and places, right? Then we have notes. Well, if you're writing a fantasy, you may have a magic system. You may have wands and knives and objects that don't necessarily fit into any of those categories. So the advanced world building will help you with organizing those as well. And so you'll have options to add additional tabs for what works for you. So not everybody wants a magic system, but if you want one, you'll be able to go in and add your magic system, right? Stuff like that. So the advanced world building will help with a lot of, I'm not familiar enough with that program to say, yeah, it'll help with all of those things, but it will help with a lot of the concerns that fantasy and sci-fi writers have, which really, honestly, that's why we created it. People that are doing really advanced and wide world building need something that's just a little bit more. Doesn't have to be a huge change, but just a little bit more that gives them some more control and organization. And that's one of the things that I will say for those of you that feel overwhelmed when you get into a new software. Don't use everything all at once. Just learn one thing at a time and learn what you need to learn. I would bet that most people on this call do not use the advanced features in Word because you don't need them, right? You don't need them. You don't even know how to use them. So you're not an editor. You're not like me. You don't use macros. I'm like, I don't know what a macro is. Don't want to use that. Ew, gross, right? So don't do it. Anything that makes you in your writing process makes you want to stop writing, don't do that. That is bad. Whatever it is, stop writing. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Okay, great. All right, we've got a couple very specific questions here. I was trying to hit the biggest one. Someone asked, does this work well on Plottr Pro? At this point in time, I'm not even sure what that refers to. So if you have a specific question on what works well on Plottr Pro, let us know. Viver says, has anyone made a template for use with John Truby's character web approach? Do you happen to know if you've got that?
No, we cannot use that because that is copyrighted.
Okay.
And we do not have permission to do so. You can create your own template. And there's a YouTube video where I teach you how to create your own template.
Nice.
So if you have a favorite thing like that, look up that video on YouTube and you can walk through that process and create your own template for even things that are copyrighted. You just have to be careful about sharing that template. If you shared that template in any way where you were making money off that template, you could find yourself in trouble. So don't do that.
And just for a lot of folks who have the specific questions, if you go to the page that we've been sending you to that has their discount, you can click down. There's a whole bunch of FAQs down at the bottom, and one of the boxes is how do we support you? And there's a whole bunch of information on how the team at Plottr actually supports authors through the whole process and through all of these things. So looks very robust in terms of how much training you all provide, which is wonderful. When adding a scene template, like the action adventure plot, it had beat down below and just numbered. What does that? Oh, that's because you changed it to show beats instead of chapters, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly. You can change that to whatever you want. Most of the beats will have a default that they default to. So when you look at them in that dashboard, you'll see this one says chapters, this one says beats, whatever the case may be, but you can change that to whatever you want it to be. People will also often ask, well, this has 18 beats in it and my novel is 36 chapters. How do I do that? And the answer is you just move it around to fit, a beat can have more than one scene or more than one chapter in it. So you just move it around to fit what you're writing.
Awesome. If I'm offline, can I still use the web version of Plottr?
Yes. So you'll still download the desktop app, which is what I was actually demoing, and it's actually Plottr Pro, but it's the desktop app version. And then when you come back online, it will prompt you to sync everything with your online account. So, but you can use it offline. I use it on planes all the time, and I'm not paying for Wi-Fi on a plane because I'm cheap, and because it's unreliable. So I just don't do it. Right. So I do it. Yeah. I mean, so when I'm on a plane, I'll do whatever I'm doing with my Plottr, and then, when I land, I'll figure it out, getting to sync back up. Usually I'm using my iPad when I'm on a plane. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Can the series Bible also contain flash fiction components that aren't the flow of the series?
What I would do with those probably is put those in a separate note section called flash, that's categorized as flash fiction. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you could there's a couple different ways you could manage that. You could almost start a separate book in the series that had flash fiction in it. It just depends on how you want to, how readily do you want to have those at your fingertips, and where do you want to put them where you'll find them the easiest. It's really about that, but I would probably put them in a category under notes myself.
Great. Okay. When you re-export or re-import, does it go to the same document and update it, or does it create a whole new document? That's
new document. New document at the moment. We're working on something that will allow us to export the Scrivener file into the document on a plot line rather than as a new file. But right now it imports as a new file, but then you can copy those things between projects, copy and paste them between projects or whatever you want to do.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know if Scapel exports to Plottr?
Not directly. Scapel is the Scrivener, I don't even know what to call it. Not even really a mind mapping software, but it does, it doesn't do it directly. You'd have to go through Scrivener and then to Plottr.
Okay.
So,
is there an ETA for the advanced world building feature?
all I can say soon. I don't know how soon. Yeah, again, that's like in the programming department, and sometimes like the basic thing is like we had some cool features and then we pulled them back, right? Because and essentially the reason is we were testing them as staff and stuff like that, and they weren't they just weren't working quite well enough yet, right? So we were like, no, we're not going to release this until it's actually working the way it's supposed to work. Okay.
Okay.
So it's soon, but I don't know how soon. And we won't release it until it's ready. We don't want to release something that's buggy that you have to deal with. So
Google Doc, you can use that for exporting, importing, because you can
you can use it for
export.
exporting. Yeah, because you
Yeah.
can import a docx into Google Docs really
Yeah,
easily. I
exactly.
personally hate Google Docs, but if you love them, all the power to you. Yes.
And I'm going to guess that the answer to this is yes, because you'd be using the same login and password, whether you're on the web version or the desktop, it's all the same. So it should use the same password for Plottr Pro and the desktop Plottr app.
Yep, it's all the same. It's the same actually as your Plottr account on the Plottr website as well. So if you go to the Plottr website, when you log into your account, then you can have access to like our community templates and stuff like that. And everything's the same login. It's all the same thing.
So that we answered all the questions in there, but I have a couple of extra questions because I am currently trying to decide between the classic and pro. So it looks like the biggest thing is that it syncs between all of the syncs up on everything, and it saves files to the cloud and does the cloud backups and auto syncs and real-time collaboration. So who's the real-time collaboration with?
So I'll give you an example. So right now I'm
Okay.
working with a client who is also a friend of mine. He and his wife took a sabbatical from their jobs and basically their lives, and are traveling around for a year. He is currently in Spain, and I am in Idaho. He shared his file with me, his Plottr file with me this morning, and I can look at it in real time with him and make changes, and he can see them happening from Spain.
Oh, cool.
So, and even at that distance, the programmers will tell you like millisecond things, whatever that means. What I know is it's fast. It's almost instantaneous, right?
Nice.
Like it's almost instant that we can see the changes that each other are making. So what that enables us to do is we can get on a phone, WhatsApp call or a Zoom call or whatever, and literally collaborate without sending a file back and forth.
Nice.
So the biggest thing with editing clients and coaching clients is you don't have 5 Plottr files. One's the final, one's the final, one's the final. I mean, we've all been through that stuff. And instead of doing that, or if you're writing a series or something with another author, you can share one file over the internet, working it at exactly the same time. So you don't have to worry about, hey man, are you in the file? Get out of the file, because if I get in the file and you're in the file, it's going to rewrite over the file. And so if you're trying to do it like through OneDrive or something like that, you can share a file, but you can't both be in it at the same time, or you'll have what's called versioning issues, which I'm not going to explain because I don't know how. But what I did tell you is you will overwrite what each other are doing, right? And especially if you both got autosave on, it'll turn into this nightmare of things. If you have Plottr Pro, you don't have to worry about that. So for me, I love the cloud backups. I love being able to access it on any device where I've got access to the internet and on the web and all that. That's lovely. But the most important part is the collaboration, the ability to collaborate with other people in real time. It's so nice. So nice. Anyway.
So then the last question just is like, it's not really a question, it's more of a sentiment or a thought. Like what I have come to realize, because I used to write primarily nonfiction books and it was fact-based and I knew what I was telling people and I did my research, and the outlining to me was fairly simple because I was like, I'm teaching or talking about this topic and this is the logical flow. What I have learned since I've started writing novels is that holy wow, there's a lot to learn about the process of just writing a book, right? And it's so like, it's blowing my mind, because what I want to be able to do is I want to sit down and write a book just like I wrote my nonfiction book, which I could write in a month. My first novel took me years. And now I'm starting to see, like, going through this program with you, I'm starting to see why, because I did it all kinds of backwards. And if I had started more in this process, but it's overwhelming, like watching you put the things in there, so I guess the next question is like, what kind of support is it just the community? Like when we get this tool and we start in there and then we're like, oh my gosh, now I have to figure out every single beat, every single scene, every single blah, 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 blah. Like, and I'm like panic attacking over here. And I'm probably not the only one, because I've seen a couple people say they're ADHD and all this kind of stuff. So my people are in this audience and get me like, how do we do this? How do we learn how to be so organized with your wonderful tool?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing is to start small and work your way into it without don't go in and try to organize your entire story the very first time you organize. I mean, when I switched from being a pantser, I basically planned the last third of my book. Was the first time I planned anything really was the last third of my book. Now, by that time, the most important thing is, so I talked to a guy this weekend. So Robert Dugoni, thriller author, probably know, if you haven't heard of him, you should probably hear of him, but he's actually a really great guy. And he came to our writers conference this last weekend and taught a class. And Robert Dugoni is a straight up pantser. Like, he discovery writes every one of his books.
Wow.
But he will tell you, even as a discovery writer, the only reason he can do that is because he understands story structure.
Right.
So there's two ways you come to develop what I call an innate sense of story. The first one is consuming story. I used to say reading in your genre. Now I say consuming story, because you can listen to audiobooks, you can watch movies. I don't care what you do, but do it intentionally. Like, I have analyzed the entire Breaking Bad series, episode by episode, season by season, and the overall series arc. And the reason is because, unlike other series creators, Vince Gilligan had a plan.
Yeah.
Right. This is not Law and Order SVU,
right.
Cincinnati, right? Or whatever, that's just going to go on for 40 seasons. Right. There was a plan. Right. There's a midpoint of the series. There's a dark night of the soul in the series that is also contained within seasons and episodes, right? But the only way I go through and I intentionally study story structure, I'm taking 2 classes. People like, you're the plot guy. And I'm like, I'm taking 2 story structure classes right now at the same time. Why? Because I want to understand story even better. Okay. So you must understand stories. So you can learn it by studying. You can learn it by analyzing stories that you watch, read, consume in other ways. But the other way you can do it is just practice creating stories.
Yeah.
If you have to start with shorter stories and work your way into novels, whatever the case may be, although short stories are actually harder for many people. But I tell people, like, I would often tell people, if you want to get better at writing, take a journalism course. You learn to write to a word count and a deadline. And when you have to write as an author and you want to do it for a living, which clearly I like to eat, my wife likes nice things, so I have to make money at this. Right. And so if you're going to make a living at it, you have to learn a system. Right. And so you need to learn write tight and write to a deadline. Those are 2 things you learn. Well, you learn that from journalism. Right. Despite the bad rap journalism gets right now. But anyway, but you can learn that from short stories as well, where you write short stories for an anthology. You have a timeline, you have a deadline, and you have to write to a word count. Right. Beautiful, because it teaches you as a writer to be better. Okay, it teaches you to be better and faster. The more you understand story structure, the more you can pants that first draft, and it actually turns out decent. You're still going to have to revise it against the story structure, but you don't have to start with this high level of organization, like, I need to know everything about every character and stuff like that. The client I was talking about that shared his file with me this morning, he is now, after he's written his first draft, giving his characters personality tests and looking at their Clifton strengths and their Enneagram, right? Because now he knows who they are. So now he's going back and doing that. He didn't do that before he started because he didn't know who they were. But now he's like, I need to add more tension, more backstory to this novel, and I don't know who these people are. And I'm like, give them a personality test and find out who they are. So there's all kinds of ways and orders that, like, you don't have to do things in a certain order, like I do things in a certain order. That order for some of you may cause you to twitch and you may hate it. Well, if it causes you to want to stop writing, then don't do that. Do it your way, because your way will work better for you. And I know that sounds obvious, but sometimes people just need permission to go, you know what, it's okay to break the system. The only rule is it has to work. Only rule.
But to your point, though, and thank you, because that calms me down a little bit, knowing that I can use the tool, how it works for me. But to your point, and to speaking to authors about selling books, the reality is there are formulas that really shouldn't be broken. And I think this tool helps you make sure that you're getting all the formulas in there. And I think what happens with a lot of writers, new authors in particular, is we have a great idea and we want to write this story, but we don't know and understand all the elements of the craft that actually go into reading. When you're reading, using that as an example, you start to see the patterns and all of those types of things, but it really is a craft that we have to learn, so that when we're pitching agents or when we're selling our books to readers, they know that logical process that they don't realize that they know, but they know the tropes, they know the beats, they know the things that are supposed to be there. And sometimes we don't always get that in our writing if we're not following an organized path. So thank you. That
Yeah.
like that's a,
Well,
and
because
that's the
there's a
piece
couple
I'm
different
learning.
things with that I'll try not to take too much time, but there's a couple things with that. First of all, like when a reader's reading your book, sometimes they'll tell you this part just doesn't seem right.
Right.
Now, they don't know what's wrong with it, but they know enough about story because they're an avid reader that they know something is wrong. They won't tell you your inciting incident is timed wrong. They're not going to tell you that. People often underestimate the amount of education it takes to be a good novelist. By that, I don't mean college. In fact, most of the time, I seriously don't mean college. Like there's some value to certain things that you learn from a degree, and I'm not going to tell you not to ever go get a degree, but I'm going to tell you that there are things that you will not learn in those classes, right? You just won't. So you're going to have to educate yourself, and that's through conferences, through instructional stuff like this. Like one of my main things as a Plottr Education Lead is, like, we taught a whole class on the 3-act structure. Did we use Plottr during that class? Yeah, I used Plottr to illustrate the 3-act structure. But the point of the class was not to sell you a copy of Plottr. The point of the class was to get you familiar with the most fundamental story structure that most other story structures are based on. Right? If you can understand that one, you can start to understand the others. Because me as an author, I want to see you be successful in your writing. That's my number one thing. So I tell people, show me your beautiful Plottr file that you created for your story. That's fantastic. You know what's going to make me even happier? Show me the first draft that you finished using that Plottr file, and then I'm a happy guy, right? So I'm not about like, and I tell people, Plottr may not be right for you. I don't know, right? I think it's right for a lot of people because it's been developed by writers, for writers. We have all this great stuff, right? But it may not be the tool for you. If it's not, use what works for you. Again, back to my only rule, it just has to work. It doesn't matter what it is, it just has to work.
Right.
So
that is a good way to look at it. Okay, we had another question pop in here. If I choose the children's book plot to start, will it have prompts in the template?
Yeah, it has some. It doesn't necessarily have writing prompts, but it has bullet points about what should kind of be happening at that point in the structure. And there's a couple of different structures that you could use for children's books. And if you end up diving into doing that, there's all kinds of stuff that we can do. So yeah.
Well, Troy, thank you so much for all of the information. This has been a great info session. This discount is available. I believe the folks at Plottr have made this available until September 30th of this year. So yes, you don't have to, if you're not ready for it, and but know that it expires on the 30th and use it by then. However, if you're already in the process of getting going, just take my advice and make your life easier by using a tool that will help you rather than having to come back later. but I'm excited, and multiple people have posted in the chat that your community is fantastic, that the support is fantastic, that the tutorials are fantastic, and I mean, I've known Roland for quite a while. I know he's a great guy. I appreciate what you have brought to our audience, and you obviously seem to know what you're talking about too. So thank you.
Yes, and on that note, if you ever need any support, if you have questions, just ask. If you are in our Facebook group, just ask. Someone will answer. If you contact support on our website, whatever it is that you need to do, but we will get you an answer if you have a problem. Because if it's a technical problem, the support people will answer. If it's a writing problem, sometimes they'll pass it to me and ask me to answer, and I'll just ask it for you. Because yeah, I answer it for you, because again, I want you to be successful as an author. That's my primary goal.
Well, we appreciate again your support as a sponsor for allowing us to bring this type of training to our audience and tools that help us as we move forward in writing, publishing, and selling books. So thanks again for supporting the Women in Publishing Summit. And everyone, this will be up. The replay will be up where you can head straight over to the Women in Publishing Summit Facebook page and look at our live videos. It's been streaming there. It will be on our YouTube channel as soon as this video renders and processes. It's quite long, so that may take a few hours. And we'll be reminding you through email about the coupon, the discount code, and all of those types of things. Check out womeninpublishingsummit.com/events for all of our upcoming webinars, tutorials, trainings, all of that kind of stuff. And we will see everyone at our next event. Again, thank you, Troy, so much for your time and training session. This was really fantastic.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone, have a great day. We'll see you soon. Bye.